The fact is, you're exactly right. They have no evidence showing that President Biden received payments from foreign actors. To the contrary, we have millions and millions of dollars, hard evidence showing that this money went to President Trump. So it's hypocrisy.
Now, you contrast that with what we see the Republicans doing. It's simply a matter of them bending the knee again to Trump. It is the cult-like mentality that we see that is becoming pervasive in this country, where they say that he's our ruler. It doesn't matter what he does. He can violate the law. We should just ignore it. We should not ignore it.
As MAGA Republicans renew their efforts to baselessly impeach President Biden this year, two superstar Democrats, Katie Porter of California and Jasmine Crockett of Texas, are publicly shredding the GOP over the recent scandal, proving that Donald Trump is actually guilty of the very sort of corruption that Republicans pretend to be upset about. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you leave. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, I have several clips for us to look at here, but before I look at any of them with you, I just want to remind you, we did a video about the scandal, but a quick recap. House Democrats recently released a very long report proving with receipts that Donald Trump, when he was president, received $8 million at least from various foreign powers, including between 5 and 6 million from China. Okay. Now, Republicans are claiming that Joe Biden and the Biden crime family received money from China, and they've not been able to prove any of it with respect to Biden. But during the time in which Biden was a private citizen. Okay, so they're casting aspersions, they're blurring the lines, they're moving the goalposts. But if you take every claim they make at face value, they're saying that when he was a private citizen, when he wasn't senator, vice president, or president, Joe Biden received money from a foreign power. They can't point to any policy that he changed when he was vice president or president in receipt of this bribe. And again, that's assuming you take any of it at face value. But we know for a fact that Donald Trump received at least $8 million while he was president, which is objectively worse than anything coming from House Republicans against Biden, even if you take their dishonest claims at face value. So with that in mind and that asymmetry clearly established, I want to play this clip. This one's from Katie Porter of California.
Well, I can't speak for what my Republican colleagues are trying to accomplish because I've been in those hearings about Hunter Biden and about President Biden. And the fact is, you're exactly right. They have no evidence showing that President Biden received payments from foreign actors. To the contrary, we have millions and millions of dollars, hard evidence showing that this money went to President Trump. So it's hypocrisy for Republicans on the Oversight Committee to look the other way, to ignore Donald Trump's violations of the Emoluments Clause of our Constitution, and then try to fabricate against evidence to the contrary allegations, baseless at this point allegations toward President Biden. And I think Americans are sick of that kind of hypocrisy. Oversight is about even-handed application of the law, about holding anyone accountable if they don't follow the rules of our Constitution. And the fact is, we have hard evidence that President Trump didn't. The Republicans, sadly, for them, have no evidence with regard to President Biden, but they're spending their time searching for evidence that may or may not be there, rather than being willing to conduct the investigation and hold President Trump accountable, setting the record out for what we expect from our president.
She's absolutely correct. We've talked about this before, but James Comer, the Republican chairman of the House Oversight Committee, when people remind him that, hey, when Donald Trump was president, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was actually a member of the White House, unlike Hunter Biden, who has never held a government position under his father or even his father's former boss, Barack Obama. When Jared Kushner was in office, he was basically the shadow secretary of state to the Middle East. And then when he left office, he received a $2 billion investment from Saudi Arabia. All of this is objectively infinitely worse than anything coming out of Hunter Biden, even again, if you take the Republican claims at face value. And when asked about it, James Comer will say things like, yeah, what Kushner did was probably it crossed the line of ethics, but we're not focused on that right now. So again, they're absolute hypocrites, morally inferior hypocrites. That's exactly what congressional Republicans are. So now I have several clips I want to play of Jasmine Crockett, who is one of my favorite freshman Democratic congresspeople. If this is the future of the party is in a great place.
Could walk us through the findings.
Yeah, so what I want the American people first to understand is that this isn't a knee-jerk reaction to the sham impeachment inquiry that we're dealing with. This is something that started 7 years ago, and Elijah Cummings actually was the ranking member, and he's the one that started this because he did have concerns because any other president would divest themselves of their interests, but Trump refused to do so. All right, so we started 7 years ago, and I know people are saying, well, why are we just now talking about it now? Well, Trump, like Trump likes to do, has fought this in court for years and years and years. It wasn't until September of 22 that he entered into a settlement agreement. And in that settlement agreement, his accounting firm was supposed to hand over documentation. So from September until basically January, we were starting to get some documents. And those few documents revealed the information that you just gave. And these are all conservative estimates. The problem that we have is that in January of 2023, Comer swore in as the chair of the committee, and Comer said, there's no need to comply anymore. Let's dismiss this all, obstructing our ability to know just how deep it went with Trump. And of that figure that you've given, I can tell you that almost $6 million of that money specifically was money from China. Yeah.
China, the country at the heart of all of the Hunter Biden conspiracy theories, Joe Biden conspiracy theories. So listen, one thing I like about that clip before we move on to the next one is that it at least addresses in part some of the reason for the delay in this report coming out. And I'll also point out that there were reports, contemporaneous reports in 2017, 2018, 2019, of then President Trump's corrupt dealings with China. Now, this report uncovers more and contextualizes what we knew already. But given the corruption associated with Trump, it's just like a blur, right? It's hard to keep track of. The only thing I'll say is that while it explains 6 out of the 7 years, it doesn't explain why House Democrats sat on this information for the past year. And I suspect it's because House Democrats still have not learned to be ruthless, right? They may have been waiting. Okay, we're gonna give the Republicans a lot of slack here, and then when we finally have had enough, we're gonna hit them with this report. This should have been a slow drip feed. This should be constant. Republicans are really good at propaganda. Republicans are really good at spraying the zone with BS. That's a paraphrase of Republican strategist Steve Bannon. Democrats have to start doing that too, especially when we have the facts on our side. We have to start adopting Republican tactics, just relentless, non-stop anti-Trump facts. And don't assume the facts speak for themselves. You have to constantly remind people. People are busy. People have a lot of things going on. There's a limited amount of space that the average person can handle with respect to daily politics. So you have to remind them in vivid, excruciating detail with facts and figures when you have them of Trump's corruption. That's what we have to do. And I hope Democrats really start to take that seriously this year. Never let up. Make it constant. Make it relentless. Make it a hurricane of anti-Trump facts proving his corruption. With that in mind, here's another clip.
As it relates to various trademarks, it became clear that there's disclosures that Trump did not give when he was sitting in the Oval Office that he's now giving now that he's running in 23. We just now learned that while he was in office, he received trademarks from the Chinese government at the same time that they're somehow checking into his hotels and things like that. And to be clear also for the American people, it's not a strict prohibition. The prohibition says, yeah, you can't just do it. But if you are going to try to do it, you at least have to come to Congress and let Congress make the ultimate decision. He chose not to do that. So there was another option. And the fact that he decided not to makes it only look like more shady Trump business.
Correct. He would not have violated the constitutional emoluments clause if he had reported the gifts and the revenues and the profits from foreign powers to himself and asked for congressional permission to keep it. That's not what he did, though, right? Because, again, he is profoundly corrupt, infinitely more corrupt than certainly any Democrat, but even most other Republicans as well. Here's another clip from Jasmine Crockett.
And now we're just getting some of the information. Now, you contrast that with what we see the Republicans doing. It's simply a matter of them bending the knee again to Trump. It is the cult-like mentality that we see that is becoming pervasive in this country, where they say that He's our ruler. It doesn't matter what he does. He can violate the law. We should just ignore it. We should not ignore it. We have never accepted this from anybody else. And the only reason we're facing a crisis right now is because he wants to act as if the Constitution doesn't apply to him. Well, I have news for him. If he wants to be in this country where we believe in a democracy, then he needs to abide by our laws as well as the Constitution.
100%. And we talked about this. The MAGA movement is a cult. The Republican Party is an authoritarian cult of personality, and they would never, nor should they ever, accept the sort of nonsense they're putting out from Democrats. If Democrats were saying, you know what, Democrats are entitled to absolute civil and criminal immunity. Like, Democratic presidents shouldn't be allowed to be criminally or civilly liable for crimes they committed while in office. Then stuff like that, which is right now an argument that MAGA and Trump supporters are offering, gross, anti-American, unpatriotic stuff like that. If Democrats ever did that, Republicans would be rightly furious. But when it comes to themselves and to Donald Trump, they grade themselves on a curve. It's okay for that. It's okay for them to do that in their mind. Donald Trump famously said it, 7 or 8 years ago. He could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose a single vote. That is absolutely true. Republicans don't care about facts. They don't care about consistency. They don't care about principles. And they would never accept this sort of behavior if the shoe was on the other foot. Which brings me to a great article written in the New York Magazine. It's called Getting Impeached Over the Iron Law of Trump Opponent Scandals. Trump Always Did Something Worse. And it's written by a guy named Jonathan Chait. So this serves another illustration. He's referring to the recent scandal that Trump received nearly $8 million at least from foreign powers. He says it serves as another illustration of what I've come to see as the iron law of Trump scandals. Anything a Trump opponent may do, Trump will do worse. And he cites the Hillary Clinton example for her emails. This was deemed a massive political liability for Clinton because it was deemed, not unreasonably, the worst thing she had done as a public servant. But even by the narrow standard of upholding executive branch communication protocols, Trump's behavior was vastly more irresponsible. He routinely communicated on unsecured cell phones, conducted foreign policy in a social club anyone could join, and was a magnet for spies, mishandled classified documents, and yes, allowed his advisors to conduct business by personal email, including Mark Meadows as chief of staff, as well as, I believe, Ivanka Trump and others as well. The email story was bad by Hillary Clinton standards. By Trump standards, it barely registered. Republicans are currently organizing a plan to impeach President Biden over foreign payments. The centerpiece of the indictment is a charge that Joe Biden received payments from China through his son Hunter. And then they talk about the $40,000 personal loan from Joe to James, and then James paid it back. It is true that Hunter Biden received money from China, a fact that underscores the ethically questionable business model of trading on his father's name, nepotism. Joe Biden permitted his son and his brother James to profit from the perception of access to him. There is no evidence, however, that Joe Biden received any money from those schemes. The $40,000 check was loan repayment, not a cut of the profits. Also, it occurred in 2017 after Biden's term as vice president had ended. The bottom line is that Republicans are trying to impeach Joe Biden over the false accusation he received $40,000 from China while he was no longer a public servant. And here we learn that Trump collected more than $5 million from China during his presidency. That's worse. Everyone can see that. Even if you accept the totally false claims that Biden got money from China in 2017, Trump's profits from China during, not after his presidency, were much worse, right? And so on and so forth. It goes down at the very bottom. The fact that Democrats are less corrupt than Trump is hardly a reason to accept unethical behavior. Biden never should have permitted his brother and son to sell the illusion of access to his decisions, and they would be better positioned to attack Trump's corruption if their nominee had a cleaner record, right? This is Chait's enlightened centrist approach, but he says, still, there is a reason Trump is now calling Biden Crooked Joe after calling his previous opponent Crooked Hillary. It's the same reason he called Ted Cruz Lion Ted. He needs to obscure the reality that even judging solely through the lens of the worst thing about whomever he's running against, Donald Trump is always, always worse. That's simply true. And this is a fact I feel compelled to rub in the faces of conservatives and enlightened centrists very harshly every time I have the chance. You are free to criticize elected Democrats. You are free to criticize liberals, progressives. We are not perfect. There's plenty to talk about. But you should be principled and consistent in your standards. And by the standards, if you are an anti-corruption advocate, if you oppose corruption, then inevitably you will arrive at one conclusion. Elected Republicans are objectively worse, and Donald Trump is objectively worse than any of them. And there is no contest in terms of corruption when you compare Joe Biden to Donald Trump. Joe Biden, on his very worst day, is infinitely less corrupt than Donald Trump on his very best day. This is a wild asymmetry. Donald Trump is objectively worse morally, cognitively, in terms of record, and in terms of principle, and in terms of integrity. It's simply a fact, and anyone who says otherwise is either ignorant or a liar. Let me know what you think in the comments.